Consider this. Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most notorious serial killers, had a completely ordinary childhood. Born into a middle-class family in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Dahmer's early years were unremarkable, his days filled with school, play, and family dinners. His parents, Lionel and Joyce Dahmer, remember a happy, curious boy with a keen interest in nature. This fascination, though seemingly innocent, would later take a sinister turn. As Dahmer grew older, he developed a morbid curiosity about the inner workings of animals, often collecting roadkill and examining their insides. This hobby, initially dismissed as a peculiar interest in biology, was perhaps the first sign of the darkness that lurked within him. His high school years were marked by increasing isolation, as Dahmer began to withdraw from his peers, his family, and the world around him. Despite his seemingly normal upbringing, there were subtle signs of the monster that he would become. But as Dahmer grew older, the darkness within him began to emerge. As Dahmer transitioned into adulthood, his disturbing interests began to evolve into something far more sinister. Jeffrey Dahmer, a name that would later become synonymous with horror, had a seemingly normal early adulthood on the surface. After high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, serving as a combat medic in Germany. But beneath this facade of normalcy, his inner turmoil was escalating. Dahmer was honorably discharged due to his increasing alcoholism, a vice he turned to in an attempt to suppress his dark urges. However, the alcohol wasn't enough. The thoughts, the fantasies that had been festering since his adolescence were growing stronger. They were more than just thoughts now. He was drawn to the macabre, the unthinkable. But it wasn't just a fascination anymore. It was a compulsion, a need. Then came the day that marked a turning point in his life, his first murder. It was the summer of 1978. Dahmer was 18 years old, living alone in his family home, abandoned by his parents who were caught up in a bitter divorce. An encounter with a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks led to a gruesome act of violence. Dahmer invited Hicks to his house, and when the young man attempted to leave, Dahmer bludgeoned him with a barbell and strangled him to death. This act, horrific as it was, served as a terrifying catalyst for Dahmer. It was as if a dam had burst within him, unleashing a torrent of darkness that he could no longer control. The thrill of the kill, the sense of power it gave him, was intoxicating. He was no longer just a troubled young man, he was a predator on the prowl. After this first act of violence, Dahmer's descent into the abyss was swift and terrifying. His journey into the heart of darkness had just begun, and the world was yet to witness the full extent of his monstrous nature. And between 1987 and 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer unleashed a reign of terror that would shock the world. This would become a 4-year period that would forever be seared into the annals of criminal history. Dahmer's crimes during this time were not just murders, they were a chilling exploration of control and dehumanization. He sought to reduce his victims to mere objects, to playthings that he could manipulate at will. His targets were often young men, lured with promises of money or simply companionship. What awaited them was a fate far more horrifying than they could have ever imagined. Dahmer's fascination with death and control took a sinister turn when he attempted to create what he termed zombies. This was not a nod to pop culture or horror films, but rather a grotesque manifestation of his desire for complete control. He believed that by performing certain acts on his victims, he could turn them into compliant, submissive beings that would never leave him. This twisted fantasy only added another layer of horror to his already gruesome deeds. As Dahmer's spree continued, the world outside remained oblivious to the nightmare unfolding within the walls of his Milwaukee apartment. The scale of his crimes was only matched by the audacity of his actions. Dahmer did not just kill, he committed acts that defied comprehension. Each crime seemed to embolden him, each act of violence feeding his twisted desires. The terror reached its peak between 1990 and 1991, when Dahmer's murder rate dramatically increased. It was as if he was spiraling out of control, his twisted fantasies consuming him. The shocking reality was that Dahmer was not just a murderer, he was a predator in the truest sense of the word, a man who hunted his victims with a chilling precision and detachment. As the body count rose, Dahmer's actions seemed to grow bolder and more deranged. The reign of terror was far from over, but the clock was ticking, and the world was about to wake up to the horrifying truth of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes. In July 1991, Dahmer's reign of terror came to an abrupt end. A chilling end to a horrific saga that had held Milwaukee and indeed the entire nation in its terrifying grip. This was the moment when the monster was finally unmasked. It all began with the daring escape of Dahmer's final intended victim. Tracy Edwards, a name that would forever be etched in the annals of true crime history, managed to flee from the clutches of the notorious killer. It was his courage and quick thinking that led the police to Dahmer's lair of horror. When the police arrived at the scene, they were met with a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The apartment was a disturbing tableau of Dahmer's gruesome activities. The shock on the faces of those officers, hardened by years of law enforcement, spoke volumes about the ghastly nature of the discoveries made that day. News of Dahmer's capture spread like wildfire, setting off a media frenzy. Reporters descended on the quiet neighborhood, their camera flashes illuminating the night, the once anonymous apartment building now etched into the public consciousness as the scene of unimaginable horrors. The name Jeffrey Dahmer, which had once meant nothing to the world, was now synonymous with evil. The media painted a picture of a man so depraved, so alien to our understanding of humanity, that it was almost impossible to believe he had lived among us. The quiet, unassuming man who had kept to himself was revealed to be a predator of the worst kind. The public's fascination with Dahmer was a grim reflection of our collective fear and disbelief. How could such a monster exist among us? How could he have hidden in plain sight for so long? These questions would form the basis of countless investigations, books, and documentaries in the years to come. With Dahmer's arrest, one of the most horrifying chapters in American crime history came to a close. Yet, the shadow of his crimes continues to linger, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside within the human soul. The impact of Dahmer's crimes rippled through society, leaving a lasting stain. His trial, which unfolded before an international audience, was filled with gruesome details that left many grappling with the depth of human depravity. The court sentenced Dahmer to 15 consecutive life terms in prison, a testament to the magnitude of his crimes. The public reaction to Dahmer's atrocities was one of horror and disbelief. How could someone, especially a seemingly ordinary man, commit such heinous acts? The questions echoed in the minds of many, stirring a wave of fear and caution. Suddenly, the monster wasn't under the bed or in the closet. It was living next door, looking just like everyone else. Dahmer's case sparked a significant shift in law enforcement practices. It exposed a series of missed opportunities and failures in the system that allowed Dahmer to continue his reign of terror undetected for so long. Law enforcement agencies across the country took note, implementing changes to improve their investigative procedures. They began to pay closer attention to missing persons reports, especially those involving marginalized communities, and to communicate more effectively between jurisdictions. But perhaps the most profound impact of Dahmer's crimes was the societal conversation they ignited. His acts brought the issue of mental health into the spotlight, forcing society to confront the realities of psychopathy and its potential consequences. It also highlighted the dangers of societal apathy, of failing to notice or act when something doesn't seem right. The conversation continues today as we strive to understand and prevent such instances of horrific violence. In the end, Dahmer's chilling legacy serves as a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that can exist in the human heart. It underscores the importance of vigilance, of not taking at face value the facade that people present to the world. Jeffrey Dahmer's story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most ordinary of faces.